72 hours behind you. Nicotine, 0. The pharmacokinetic phase, the drug leaving your body, is over. What begins now is fundamentally different in character. The clinical timeline names days 4 through 7, the neurological rewire. It's an accurate description of what's happening at the cellular level inside your brain. Proteolytic enzymes are actively dismantling surplus nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. SPECT imaging of people at this stage of cessation shows measurably different receptor density compared to active smokers. The structure of the addiction is being physically degraded, but neurological rewiring doesn't feel like progress. It feels like anhedonia, the inability to feel normal pleasure from things that used to provide it. It feels like decision fatigue. It feels like a brain that is working hard just to maintain baseline function, with nothing left over for enthusiasm or motivation. This is the valley. The acute pharmacokinetic crisis is behind you. The neurological reorganization is underway. Between those two things, there is a period of low-grade persistent difficulty that is different from, and in some ways harder to manage than, the intense craving spikes of days 1 and 2. Not because it's more dangerous, but because it lacks the dramatic quality that commands attention and preparation. This video explains hours 73 through 96, what your brain is doing, what your lungs are doing, and why this phase looks and feels the way it does. Hour 73. Proteolytic enzymes are now actively degrading surplus nicotinic acetylcholine receptors on neuronal surfaces. This receptor downregulation is measurable via SPECT imaging. It is the central biological event of this phase, and it is happening right now in response to sustained nicotine absence. At hour 74, the dopamine deficit is at a documented level. Tyrosine hydroxylase, the rate-limiting enzyme in dopamine synthesis, remains suppressed. Baseline dopamine in the nucleus accumbens is approximately 30 to 40% below pre-cessation levels. This produces clinical anhedonia. The technical definition of anhedonia is reduced ability to experience pleasure from normally rewarding activities. It's not depression. It's a measurable dopaminergic state that has a known timeline of resolution. Hour 75. Your bronchial cilia are reactivating. Cilia lining the bronchial epithelium begin regaining coordinated beating patterns after being paralyzed by chronic nicotine and acrolein exposure. Initial ciliary beat frequency is approximately 4 to 6 Hz compared to the normal 12 to 15 Hz. Your lungs are slowly rebuilding their self-cleaning machinery. At hour 76, fasting blood glucose is normalizing. Without nicotine triggering adrenal epinephrine release, hepatic glycogenolysis is no longer being artificially stimulated. Blood glucose is settling toward the normal 70 to 100 milligrams per deciliter range without nicotine-driven spikes. If you've been experiencing blood sugar fluctuations that mimic anxiety, this is why, and it is resolving. Hour 77. Cortisol remains elevated. Salivary cortisol levels are still 15 to 25% above baseline as the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis continues recalibrating. This sustained cortisol elevation is a direct contributor to the irritability and sleep disruption of days 4 and 5. It is not indefinite. The HPA axis reset takes 4 to 7 days from cessation. At hour 78, GABA signaling is recalibrating. The GABA to glutamate balance, inhibitory versus excitatory, is shifting back toward homeostasis. Nicotine had desensitized GABAergic interneurons in the ventral tegmental area. Their recovery is permitting more effective inhibitory control over excitatory circuits. 20 minutes of moderate aerobic exercise at any point today increases endogenous GABA production by approximately 27%. Hour 79. Your gums are receiving better blood flow. Gingival blood flow, previously reduced by nicotine's vasoconstrictive effect on oral mucosal capillaries, is measurably increasing. Immune cells and growth factors are being delivered to periodontal tissues damaged by vaping aerosols. You may notice your gums feel slightly warmer or more sensitive. This is circulation returning. Hour 80. Serotonin transporter density in the dorsal raphe nucleus is beginning to recalibrate. Nicotine had augmented serotonergic firing. Its absence has temporarily reduced serotonin availability. This reduction contributes to the emotional lability of this phase, the shifting between frustration, sadness, and brief moments of okayness within the same hour. It is a transitional state, not a stable one. Hour 81. Platelet aggregation rates are declining toward normal ranges. Nicotine had enhanced thromboxane A2 production and platelet adhesiveness, increasing the tendency of blood to clot inappropriately. With nicotine cleared, this risk is measurably reduced. Your blood's clotting dynamics are becoming less dangerous. At hour 82, your white blood cell count is beginning its downward trend. Nicotine-induced chronic inflammation had kept WBC counts elevated. The neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio is shifting toward the healthy range of 1.0 to 3.0. Systemically, you are less inflamed than you have been in the time you've been using. Hour 83. Craving frequency has declined to approximately 5 to 6 episodes per day, down from 8 to 10 during acute withdrawal. But the character of cravings is shifting in a way worth understanding. They are becoming less physically urgent and more psychologically persuasive. Early withdrawal cravings scream. Day 4 cravings argue. They present reasons. They sound like logical statements. Just one won't matter. You've been so stressed. You can quit again tomorrow. This shift from visceral to cognitive is not a sign the cravings are weakening. It's a sign they're changing strategy. The prefrontal cortex, as it recovers, becomes the target, not the limbic system. At hour 84, functional connectivity between your prefrontal cortex and anterior cingulate cortex is strengthening. These regions work together for impulse control and decision-making under stress. Nicotine's chronic disruption of this circuit is resolving. The improvement is gradual and won't be consciously detectable, but it's measurably occurring in functional MRI studies of people at this stage. Hour 85. Endothelial cells lining your blood vessels are increasing nitric oxide production as nicotine's inhibition of endothelial nitric oxide synthase lifts. Improved nitric oxide bioavailability reduces arterial stiffness. 10 minutes of brisk walking amplifies this effect. Exercise is the most potent known stimulus for endothelial nitric oxide release. At hour 86, taste receptor cells are recovering. Taste bud turnover occurs every 10 to 14 days, and new cells forming now have never been exposed to vaping aerosols. Sensitivity to sweet and bitter compounds is measurably improving. Something you ate yesterday might taste different today. Hour 87. The locus coeruleus, the brainstem region that nicotine had chronically stimulated to release norepinephrine, is recalibrating its firing rate. Norepinephrine governs arousal, attention, and the fight-or-flight response. As the locus coeruleus recalibrates, you may experience alternating states of lethargy and hypervigilance within the same day. This is not mood instability in the psychiatric sense. It's a documented feature of autonomic recalibration. Hour 88. Bronchial smooth muscle tone is normalizing. Without nicotine's effects on muscarinic receptors, the smooth muscle lining your airways is relaxing to a more natural baseline caliber. Airway width is gradually widening. FEV1, forced expiratory volume in 1 second, the primary spirometric measure of lung function, is beginning to trend upward. Take a deep breath right now. Notice how it compares to day 1. At hour 89, mucus clearance is increasing. As bronchial cilia regain motility, the mucociliary escalator is moving accumulated particulate matter and inflammatory debris upward from the lower airways. Productive coughing at this stage is the system working. The debris being expelled is material that has been trapped in your bronchial tree. Let it come out. Hour 90, a specific number worth knowing. In 91 hours of cessation, you have avoided exposure to approximately 1,820 inhalations of aerosol containing formaldehyde, acrolein, acetaldehyde, and ultrafine metal particles. Each avoided inhalation represents a reduction in cumulative oxidative damage to pulmonary and vascular tissue. The number is specific and real. The cellular damage reduction is real. Hour 91. Melatonin secretion timing remains disrupted. Nicotine had suppressed pineal melatonin output by stimulating sympathetic superior cervical ganglion activity. Its absence allows recovery, but the circadian clock requires several days to re-entrain. You may feel simultaneously tired and mentally activated as evening approaches. The endogenous melatonin signal is present but not yet synchronized with your preferred sleep time. A consistent dark sleep environment helps accelerate re-entrainment. Hour 92. Melatonin recovery is underway but incomplete. You may find it difficult to fall asleep at your usual time while simultaneously experiencing strong daytime fatigue. This is a circadian phase mismatch. The internal clock is not yet aligned with your environment. Consistent sleep and wake times combined with morning light exposure are the fastest path back to alignment. At hour 93, the GABA glutamate balance is still recovering, and with it comes a specific symptom worth naming: heightened startle response and emotional overreaction to minor stimuli. With GABAergic inhibition still below normal, excitatory glutamate signaling is relatively unchecked in certain circuits. A sudden noise, a minor frustration, an unexpected message, these may produce responses that feel outsized relative to the actual provocation. This is the excitatory-inhibitory imbalance of the neurological rewire, and it normalizes as GABA function restores. Hour 94. C-reactive protein and interleukin-6 are both declining. Systemic inflammation is measurably lower than at the start of day 1. This has direct cardiovascular benefit. Lower CRP correlates with reduced risk of myocardial events. This improvement is invisible to you subjectively, but is recorded in your blood chemistry today. Hour 95. Tonight's sleep will do something important that you can't feel, but that matters biologically. Slow-wave sleep accelerates nAChR receptor downregulation. During slow-wave sleep, the brain's glymphatic clearance increases 60%, removing degraded receptor fragments and metabolic waste from the interstitial space around neurons. The sleep tonight isn't just rest, it's molecular cleanup of the receptor dismantling work that's been happening throughout the day. 96 hours. 4 full days without nicotine. Approximately 20 to 30% of surplus nicotinic acetylcholine receptors have been pruned. The brain has survived the deepest dopamine trough of the sprint. The cardiovascular system is measurably improved. The immune system is incrementally stronger. The lungs are cleaning themselves. The clinical data for this milestone is specific. Dopamine levels in the nucleus accumbens are still below baseline, but the enzymatic machinery for increased production is being assembled. The brain is not just adapting, it is rebuilding. The receptor density moving toward non-smoker levels means fewer and fewer binding sites that will demand nicotine. The psychological state at hour 96 is documented as cautious, a mix of accomplishment and clear-eyed awareness that the process is not over. This caution is appropriate. It is not pessimism. It is the rational recognition that neurological rewiring takes days, not hours. What you have at 96 hours is not the finish line. It is the beginning of a trajectory that continues to improve. Day 5. Dopamine synthesis begins recovering. Cravings drop to 4 to 5 per day and begin shifting from physical urgency to behavioral habit triggers. Sleep starts to improve in measurable ways. We'll explain exactly what's happening in your reward circuitry and why day 5 is when many people have their first hour where they